It's Kathy Ulistalo with UpwardHouse Learning. Thanks for tuning in to Kathy's Corner for our most recent vlog. And today we're going to talk about mental health. And our reason for addressing this issue, even though we are a tutoring and homeschool assistance agency, is because we understand the connection between mental health and academic success. And we recognize that if there are mental health concerns or issues, then typically we see a high frustration level among students, difficulty focusing, perhaps even rebellion against rules, procedures, those kinds of things. And so when we begin addressing mental health, and I have challenged parents in our blogs and some previous vlogs, including the one that we call, it's how about if we unlock it? Unlocking logical potential. So feel free to check those out. But I have challenged parents to look deeper into mental health and into discussion, looking into discussing deeper mental health issues and the root causes of our students' struggles in academics. So kind of switching the paradigm to looking at academic success as the fruit or the result of positive mental health rather than just kind of labeling our students as struggling learners and leaving it at that. So I have Bethany Jensen with us today, and she is one of the parents of the families I work with. With the Jensens, I work with their two oldest children primarily, but there's also a trickle down to the three younger children as well. So I'm really glad to have Bethany's perspective and for us to have a conversation today. We'd love for you to chime in the comments and even let us know if you have questions or want more information. Feel free to message us in the comments or through our website or email. Our website is upwardhouselearning.com. My email is upwardhouse@gmail.com. So feel free to reach out in any of those methods and might even come up with a new vlog on a new topic to cover. So just feel free to chime in with us. So Bethany, I just thought as we get started, we could talk a little bit about what we've both observed in the mental health realm and kind of how that affects kids in general. And then we'll get into some of our personal experiences in a little bit.
But I think like you, I've noticed that kids who've experienced bullying or trauma or have some kind of mental health background, it makes learning all the more difficult. And it can make, especially a standard school experience, really challenging. Mm-hmm. And then kind of sets you up for, just continuing to struggle. It could be a single event where they just have a hard time for like a week or a month, and then they just feel behind after that. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it can kind of spiral out of control. And a lot of times I think kids that are labeled as just not very smart or have trouble in school, even behavioral problems in school. A lot of it just comes back to, are they healthy emotionally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can think of, as you were talking, I thought of a couple common labels that when I was teaching in public school, just kind of those conversations and talking about students who are struggling. Some of these labels came out of the kids' mouths themselves, or some of them the adults who were working with them, but common ones were, I'm not good at math, or they're just not good at math, or not a good test taker, or they're just not organized, or they're scattered, or they just can't focus.
Or it can be as derogatory as just saying I'm stupid, mm-hmm. or I'm dumb. And accepting those labels for themselves and just going with it because it's you kind of reach a point where it's a little bit easier to just say that than it is to try and address the problem. Because I think especially as a child, they just don't know why they're struggling.
Yeah. I was thinking about in my classroom, I don't think of those phrases as much because I didn't allow my students to even that better not even utter out of someone's lips, because I knew at that time that there must be some solution, because I could see the children's intelligence, and I could see you can see the gears turning, but just that frustration level for them. But I wasn't willing to let them label themselves that. But I'm excited that now I've seen progress in students. I've seen this growth in a short span of time when working on kind of their mental health or emotional things, and start to process those. And then the academic growth that results from that. And so I'm very grateful that while I knew there must be something before, now I've seen it in action, and I've seen productivity. So that's exciting. Right. And I guess I'm saying that to encourage parents that there's hope, and to dive deeper with us. So
I think too, addressing it not just from, because I think a lot of parents, they see their kid struggling academically, so they just work with them academically, and saying, well, we're just going to get tutoring in math, or we're just going to get tutoring in reading skills. And I think one of the things I love so much about UpwardHouse Learning is that the entire premise is that we look at all angles. Right. We're not just going to look at the academic angle. We're going to look at the mental health angle, and the emotional health angle, and even the physical health angle. What is it that is making education a challenge? Because while I believe that education is supposed to be challenging in and of itself, it's not supposed to be impossible. Yeah. And so if you have a kid that it just seems like it's impossible, then digging a little deeper and maybe going, okay, setting aside the academic problem, is there something else that could be contributing to this, as opposed to just saying, well, I'm not good or at school, or my kid is not academically inclined. Yeah. You don't have to shut the door on learning just because it's hard. Being willing to explore other options is really important. And I think that's the biggest point of what Upward House does in our discussion today. Yeah, I've had several parents speak to me even recently. They're just like, they said, we've tried tutoring. We've tried these other things. We've even tried counseling separately, but neither one are making any progress by themselves. And so she said, can you address this with my child? Yes, I'm excited to say, yeah, absolutely. Because we're not going, and I even told her, I said, we're going to begin with working on kind of the emotional roots of things and talking about things. And I even said, do you mind if we meet in kind of a fun atmosphere with the child, so that this is a positive experience for your child? And we talk, and we're going to start with more of kind of the discipling their minds first, in larger portions, and touch on the academics and address some of those academic topics, and kind of get a full picture of where the child stands, and then move. I said, gradually there will be a shift from more focus on kind of the discipleship, and then that will kind of taper and get a little bit less, and the academic will get a little bit more. Right. But talking about the academics being the indicator of how healthy she'll be, mentally and emotionally. So it's exciting to be able to talk with parents about that, and to plant those seeds of hope, and then, see the productivity, see the blossoming that comes out of that. So parents hear some buzzwords. And feel free to chime in any that you think of too. I'm thinking ADD, ADHD, depression,
We've talked about lack of focus. Yes. Anxiety. Other special needs, dysgraphia, dyslexia, those things that they're physical manifestations. They're clearly a diagnosable need, or I guess a hurdle.
Yeah.
But again, not yes, for sure. But not feeling like we have to stick with those labels and make that a static definition. Right. But we can watch for dynamic change even within those, what are labeled disabilities.
Right.
So let's talk about kind of our own kids or our own experiences and what we've observed, and just kind of let people know what we've seen.
So with our oldest, we put her in kindergarten, and she was really intelligent and showed the ability to communicate, talk, read, learn, pick up things really quickly. And so we actually put her in school just a tad early. She excelled academically, but dealt with some bullying right away in kindergarten. And as a parent, I didn't really know what to do with this. And I noticed things at home before I noticed academic issues. And she was getting math awards and things like that, I think a couple of years in a row. And then because the bullying got so bad, we transitioned to a different school. We transitioned to a private school thinking that things would be better. Academically, it got a little more difficult for her. And we were okay with her having more of a challenge. But unfortunately, the bullying continued, even at the private school. And then our son, when he was finally ready for kindergarten, he was a completely different case, and that he was definitely less interested in sitting down and sitting still, which I think is pretty typical for boys. And so we were concerned for how that was going to go for him. Mm-hmm. And we had already kind of had a struggle with our daughter being disinterested in school because of her experience. So kind of after kindergarten with our son and about second, third grade with our daughter, we transitioned to homeschool. And we really didn't know where we wanted to go with it. We kind of just had to feel it out. At first, we kind of started off with more of a structure, which our daughter was used to. Our son was not. Mm-hmm. But we kind of immediately realized we have to work in his character. And he's very creative, very free-flowing, very active. So we would actually have to get to a point where we would say, okay, we're going to do 15 minutes of focused work time, and then you're going to do laps. You're just going to go outside and run, because just getting him to sit down for long periods of time was a huge hurdle. Mm-hmm. And we both know that, my husband and I both knew that if we sat down and made him sit down and do school at home, similarly to the way they do school in, the public school structure, that was just not going to work well for him, and it was going to frustrate all of us. Mm-hmm. So we knew right away we wanted something different. It's evolved even since then. We kind of did some unschooling, and then we've kind of reintegrated certain structures to push them academically, but it's definitely taken some healing time. Mm-hmm. And we have seen problems with, our daughter going from being really excited about math and doing really well to struggling and being a little more intimidated. It's required us to revisit building up her confidence. Mm-hmm. And so it has taken time, and we've definitely had to take more time to build them up as individuals, emotionally and mentally, before we've really focused and pushed the academic. Mm-hmm. because I feel like a lot of times, we take it for granted that academia is just an accepted part of our life and our society. But it can be a lot of pressure for people that are not prepared for that pressure. And so if you have kids that are just not ready, pushing them into academics at an early age and that being their foreseeable future can be really intimidating. So as a family, we have focused a lot on building them and teaching them about who they are, and academia being a part of that rather being the point.
Yeah. I've shared in a couple of the other blogs and some things just about some different student experiences. But what I've noticed with a couple other students who had experienced bullying, partially because of their diagnosis or their specialty being on the autism spectrum, they experienced some bullying, and we saw that the same year that began happening was the year they stopped liking math. Up until that point, they had really even loved math, which that in and of itself is rare for a child to just say, I love math. But when I noticed that parallel with a couple students, and we began working on them talking about, okay, what thoughts are spinning around in their minds over and over again when they're being distracted from focusing on the math that we are working on, and start to address, okay, is there fear present? Are they reliving something and trying to figure out why this person was mean, or what did they do to cause it? Almost wanting, one common thing with kids who have autism is they're looking for the rules and the structure so that they can operate safely and kind of know what's going to happen, know what to expect. And so this one student in particular was thinking through those situations where the person who they thought was their friend was setting them up to be made fun of. And just kind of reliving all of that over and over and over again. And I came across this student, he was already 15, and this had happened back in 7th grade. So that's like 12, 13. And so I realized he'd been spinning this for years. But when he started to address, okay, this is what I'm thinking about, this is and also encouraging him to talk to his God about it, to talk to God and to begin processing it and seeking his own identity and becoming okay with himself, and even identifying what are characteristics of healthy relationships and those kinds of things. So we're talking about this, and I'm teaching him math, and that was my primary role in working with him. But his parents knew, and we were in agreement that if we talk about these emotional issues, we're going to see more productivity. And he went from working on a 5th grade curriculum when I first started working with him. Within 1 calendar year, he had completed his pre-algebra.
Yeah.
So 5th grade is where he got stuck. In fact, the bullying happened in 7th grade, but he regressed and couldn't. And one thing we know from mental health, and I've heard from different counselors and through reading journals about psychological issues, and even when I was doing training on human trafficking, when there's a trauma that happens, it's as if our logical brain unplugs and is no longer engaged, because we're then operating with our animal brain.
Right.
And like that survival mode. And so, and I remember even in the classroom, like that was one of my goals, was for kids to not feel like they had to defend themselves or like they had to be in survival mode in the classroom. So it's not until those emotional issues start to be addressed that that logical brain can plug in again. And we see that even in stroke victims, that the logical calculation and math is the last thing to come back, typically with stroke patients. So all of that combined, his growth was so drastic, I think, because he was willing to talk about those things, and his family supported the discussion of those things, and even he was willing to talk to God about it. And so those who are willing to go deeper will see quicker progress, and see greater progress. In my experience, it seems to make sense. Yeah. There's a direct relationship, to use a math term. Yeah. You shared a little bit about your own kids. I know I've been talking for a little bit, but I'm going to share also from my own child, who had gone through trauma as a small child, and still has some trauma triggers, far fewer now than before. But as we're seeing, as she heals more and more from those traumas, she's able to focus longer. She is able to take tests now. Granted, there were some violent things that happened at her school last year on the day of her test. And so that test didn't go well. I'm sure it didn't go well for more kids than just her, but her having some pretty severe trauma triggers there. She's having to retake the Texas state standard tests. So, but we're seeing healing and even breakthrough this year throughout her academics. And so that's even a public school story of success when we deal with the emotional issues. And she has tended to be depressed over the years, high anxiety. She labels herself to have social anxiety, but I do see those things decreasing gradually. One thing that I really learned was I had to be a source of love and support more than a corrector.
Right.
And my husband has worked on correcting and guiding in a loving manner with her. And then I come along kind of in the counseling as well. And I can help her academically more now because she trusts that loving relationship. Because I've gone from nitpicking all of the little errors and things to sitting back, keeping my mouth shut, and in really consulting with the Lord about, do I say something? Do I do something? And he's told me over and over again, and it may be different with different kids, but he's told me over and over again with her, she just needs to know you love her right now.
Yeah. I think that's a huge thing that, as a society, we make such a big deal out of academics and where your kid is at academically. I think that's starting to lessen. But for a time, it was a big pressure and a big point. Where's your kid at academically? And are they where they're supposed to be? Are they achieving what they're supposed to be achieving? And so a lot of times when parents see their kids not reaching those milestones, those steps, as a parent, you start to panic and feel like you got to put on the pressure. And sometimes it can be because kids are slacking off, but I think a lot of times it's more than that. I think a lot of times it's because of anxiety. It's because of depression. It's because of things that are going on in our kids' lives that, particularly when our kids are at school, a huge portion of the day, every day of the week, we don't notice. We don't know. And they might be a completely different person at school than they are at home. I remember, being a part of a group of moms, and it was a woman who is older, and her kids were grown and had children of their own, and she was sharing a story and talking about how she had, a daughter that was just headstrong and could be really difficult to deal with at home. And she had to go in to do parent-teacher conferences, and she was a little nervous. And she goes into the school, she sits down with the teachers, and the teachers have nothing but good things to say about this child. And the mom's, glad, but kind of like, okay. So she goes home and she talks to her daughter, and she says, what's the deal? Like, they say you do this, and you have good manners, and you do what you're asked to do. And she's like, why do you act like that at school, but you don't act like that at home? And the daughter says, well, because you said we could be ourselves at home. So it's in a way, like you want your kids to be able to come home and release all that stress and that tension, because they live in a world of such high expectation and demand. And as they enter into middle school and high school, and so then there's the social pressure and the peer pressure and social media and all these different things going on, that's affecting our kids, and we really aren't aware. That was my story growing up. Is I struggled with anxiety and depression, and I didn't know what it was, and it hit me at such a young age. And my parents had no idea, and they certainly didn't know. They didn't know what to do with it. And teachers didn't recognize that that's what was going on. And so the consequence of that was telling me to buckle down, work harder, push harder, like, why aren't you getting it? And it can be really defeating. And so, as far back as 5th and 6th grade, just kind of shutting down and accepting that I can't do this. I'm just not a good student. Yeah. And I'm an author. I love books. And to this day, I can remember a teacher in the 4th grade kind of giving me a hard time about the book I had chosen to read, a book that I was actually excited about reading, and telling me that it was not a high enough reading level for me to be reading. And I felt so defeated that I didn't even finish the book. Because it felt like this was a challenge for me to read this book. It was intimidating. It was the first chapter book I had really ever read. And instead of encouraging me and recognizing that this was a challenge for me, I was discouraged. And so I really never approached reading the same way. It wasn't until I was much, much older and until I kind of healed through some of those things that I was willing to take on reading for myself again. So it's something that as parents, as teachers, I think it's so important to just notice those things. It is not all about academics. Yeah. Academics is absolutely a fruit of a healthy child, as opposed to being the point of a healthy child. Sure. So making it possible for a child to succeed absolutely is necessary to have a home or a parent that they can talk to, or at the very least an adult that they can talk to, and be able to work through these things and know that it's okay that they're struggling, that's okay.
Yeah. I've had, I guess I want parents to know that even if, sometimes unfortunately the struggle at home is the norm, and it's our normal. And so sometimes it's hard to think outside the box of what is normal to us as a family. And so we know there's an issue. I've had parents come to me like, I know there's something deeper. It's the academics aren't the problem. It's that my child is lying to me, or that my child is rebelling against the rules, or rebelling against the structure of an assignment, or just, refusing not to do it because of this, or this. Yeah. And they know that there's a deeper issue, but they can't get to it. And I want parents to know that that's part of what I'm good at.
Right.
Is, with in even the new tutors coming on with me at Upward House, that for whatever reason, God has put this mix of people together and this mix of gifts and talents together to be able to have the experience and the qualifications in education to say, okay, we know what is required. We know what is good. We know what good education or, what your child needs to attain. Mm-hmm. But also we have this mixture of people and gifts and talents that can identify just in talking to the child and talking to the family. Okay, I think this is going on. Mm-hmm. And here are some things we can do to navigate it and to walk alongside the families with that, so that whether it's, us launching new businesses or, right. People leaving public school, there are big leaps, right, from the norm of society. And what I want families to know is that we're here to walk alongside them through those big leaps. They don't have to take those leaps on their own. And it doesn't have to look like anyone else's shape, size box. Right. It's specific to that family, specific to that child. And, I can remember times I've struggled with depression from, I couldn't think back to a time when it started. I just remember feeling alone and feeling, having low self-confidence. But I do remember a specific time in high school where kind of things met a climax, and I was in a lot of extracurriculars, a lot of actually ego building things, or what could have potentially been ego building. But I was highly depressed and just laid on my floor in my bedroom and just bawled. I had my assignment. I don't even remember what subject, but I was supposed to be completing homework, and all I could do was just cry. I could not figure out how to focus, and I would read things over and over. Nothing was sinking in. And so I think maybe those personal experiences kind of launched me in this direction. And even my co-teachers in education in the public school were like, Kathy, have you ever considered counseling? And I'd go through all the reasons, yes, I have. And here's why it won't work, because of this, and this. It will not work for me. But to have the freedom now to be able to tie in what I've learned through my own walk and through education training and my walk even in discipleship, and tie all of those things together. Even, going to counselors and learning from counselors and learning about things from the extreme trauma of teaching people, not my trauma, but teaching people about the extreme trauma that young ones who have been trafficked go through. And then more recently in discipling families and their children and helping in the academics, all of that, just to kind of plant those seeds of hope for families that you're not alone. And I thank you for coming and talking with me today about kind of your experiences and what you've witnessed, and kind of a testimony of hope for the other families, to know that there's a path to walk out of struggles, and that we can walk
one more
them.
thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of give parents that encouragement. If you do have a kid that's struggling, first of all, that's okay. that's life. Things happen. And it's okay as a parent to not be okay. And finding someone like Kathy, or taking a step forward to find a counselor, or deciding that you're going to change something, that something is going to change, that's a huge step. And like Kathy said, having someone walk that out with you, and having a partner like Upward House to walk that out is huge. It's okay that it's scary. Stepping out of normal school and normal societal things it can be scary. It can be intimidating. And for those of you, maybe you're sitting there and going, I know something needs to change, but I don't know what. Sitting down with someone and just going, here's what's going on, and I don't know where to go next. Sometimes that can be the next step, is just talking to someone about it and acknowledging that something needs to change. It's okay. I think so many people avoid that first step of recognizing there is a problem because they don't know where to go next. Mm-hmm. So it is okay to not be okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for being with us today, and thank you all for watching and for learning and exploring new possibilities with us at Upward House Learning. We look forward to hearing from you in your comments, and your reach out and contact us. Let us know if there's anything you have more questions about, if there's another topic you would like for us to cover, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Take care.